Well, I'm Dean Baines, Leonard Baines, the Dean of the University of Houston Law Center. And I'm really honored to be here today to celebrate Heritage Month. And it's really important for us to think through and think about these Heritage Months. Many people will say to us, why do we need these Heritage Months? Why do we need Black History Month? Why do we need Hispanic History Month? Why do we need Asian American History Month? Why do we need Women's History Month? Well, we need these months because it allows us, people from underrepresented groups, to tell our story, right? Our story of how successful we have been, how accomplished we are, of our leaders, to let us know about our true story, not the story that's imposed on us by others. And that's why these months are so important. And I'm really delighted that we're able to have this event. I believe it may be our first Hispanic Heritage History Month at the Law Center. And many thanks to all who helped to put this together. One of the things that we've done since I've been dean is to create alumni networks of different ethnic, racial, and different groups. And so I'm very pleased that the Hispanic Law Alumni Network have gotten together and have organized and helped hold this. Many thanks to Eric Yanus and also to Justice Rivas Malloy, and also to Crystal Mata for their unwavering efforts to make this all happen. And so many thanks to all of them. So I'd like to do, before we start the formal program, we have two really amazing justices here, Justice Doreen Contreras and Justice Linda Yanus, to hear from them a little bit later. But I'd like to give you sort of just an overview of things that are going on at law school, especially in the diversity and inclusion initiatives that have taken place. So let me share my screen and go for, just from the beginning, which I should be in the beginning. So let's do slideshow. So again, I want to welcome you here to Hispanic Heritage Month, the celebration, give you a little report. So the Law Center, I've been dean for 7 years as of August 14th, 2021. I'm entering my 8th year as dean. I'm now the second longest serving dean of this law center, and I'm the first African-American dean of the law center. And one of the things I've really tried to focus on is diversity and inclusion. And so we have received this award from Inside Diversity magazine for 6 years in a row of being one of the law schools and colleges for diversity. And this year we actually were named a diversity champion, the only law school with that designation. And part of it is because, and this Inside Diversity magazine is no joke, they do a fairly comprehensive review of all the attributes of your school. And so I'm very proud that we've been able to be successful in being honored in this award for 6 years in a row. Again, I wanted to thank our co-chairs, Eric Munoz and Veronica Rivas Malloy, as Crystal Mata, for their support. And I'll tell you a little bit about them momentarily. But I also want to talk about some alumni first. So it all starts at University of Houston with Tony Bonilla, who is our first Hispanic graduate. He graduated in 1960. He's president of the Bonilla and Chapa law firm, who's very involved in LULAC, among many other civil rights organizations. And think about it, he was graduated in 1960, which means he was the first law alum from an underrepresented background. So our first Black alum was 1970. Our first Asian American alum was 1969. And so he was the first minority law school graduate, law center graduate in the law school's history. And 1960, remember, was before the Civil Rights Acts were passed in 1964. It was merely 6 years after Brown versus Board of Education. So it was quite a significant accomplishment. And he clearly was a trailblazer for so many to follow. And of course, we're going to meet and talk to and learn from Justice Doreen Contreras. I first met her at a MALDEF dinner, I guess maybe 6 or 7 years ago, is my recollection. And she was the first Latina elected to the Chief Justice of the Texas 13th Court of Appeals, and she's the second Latina statewide to hold the office of Chief Justice. And we also have the benefit of hearing from Justice Linda Yanus, who's the first Latina to serve on an appeals court in the history of Texas, the first woman to serve on the 13th Court of Appeals. She has an LM from University of Virginia Law School and her JD from Texas Southern. In terms of our faculty, our first Latinx faculty member was Jorge Rangel, who was our first member. And then Steve Zamora was our first Latino dean and first tenured Latino faculty member. And then Michael Levis, who's on the call, is now emeritus. He's still very involved in the school. He was interim president of downtown campus. He was the Bates professor of law. He is well-known in immigration and higher education scholar. We were delighted. He's a faculty member, and I'm very proud to call him my friend and advisor. So we really miss him here, though he's now living in New Mexico. And then Diego Thompson, she's also legendary. She was director of the Criminal Justice Institute. She has Newell H. Blakely Chair. She was the first Latina tenured in the state of Texas and the first Latina to hold a chair, which is a very prestigious honor in the state of Texas. So, and she's on the call. Let's congratulate her. Daniel Morales. So in the past few years, we've hired 2 new faculty members of Latino origin who are tenured. They were laterals. Daniel Morales came from the law school. He's a George A. Butler research professor, and he's filling Michael's very big shoes dealing with immigration law. And Elizabeth Trujillo came to us from Texas A&M Law School. Before that, Suffolk Law School. She's actually a UH Law graduate. She's the founding director of this initiative on law policy for the Americas. She's the first Latina alumna who's been tenured at 3 different law schools, Suffolk Law School, Texas A&M, and now University of Houston. And she's the second Latina at the Law Center as a named chair. And she's one of our alums, so we're very proud of her. And she's filling Steve Zamora's big shoes in terms of focusing on international economic law and relationships between the new NAFTA or USMCA. And then we have a new faculty member, Jessica Brigant, who's assistant professor of law. She's an associated faculty member at the Department of Psychology. She has her law degree from the University of Illinois Law School. She has her PhD from the University of Chicago in business psychology. She's going to be teaching criminal law, and we're very delighted to have her. And then we have several other faculty members who are research professors. So Julian Cardenas Garcia, he focuses on transactional petroleum issues. Ryan Marquez, who's director of the Consumer Law Clinic, and Rosemary Vega, who also is a lecturer in the Consumer Law Clinic. In terms of enrollment, our median LSAT is the highest it's been in over 10 years at 161. Our median GPA is the highest it's been in our recorded history, the last 35 years. The class is majority female, 55.5% female. And it's the largest class we had in quite some time, 245 JD students. The class is almost 40% minority, 60%, a little over 60% white. And of the minorities, over 18.4%, almost 20% Hispanic, 14.4% are Asian, 5.3% are African-American or Black. We need to do a better job with that. As I mentioned, 60-something% are white. In terms of building, we're moving along. You see it all in our background. The building, this is where they're putting the limestone base up. The building is going to be 5 stories, all above ground. It's expected to be completed by May of next year. It would move in August of next year. This will be a roof deck. And you can see it's a very unique design, which will be formed to bring people together. And the important thing about the building is that when we were doing this building, it was really important for me to think about ways that we can make sure the building is inclusive and diverse. And so one of the things that we've done is that Michael Levis and Tina Reyes, his wife, are going to have their reading room in the library going to be named after them. Many thanks to many of our Latinx alumni and friends who come together to support that effort. Tony Bonilla, our first Latinx graduate, is also doing a classroom, he and his family doing a classroom, his name. Anonymous donor is naming the locker space after our first Black graduate, James Lamont. And there's going to be lots of other opportunities for a lot of different naming, so that when our students come to this building, our students of all backgrounds, but specifically our students of minority backgrounds, they will see prominent people of diverse backgrounds who preceded them. And they can then say to themselves, that can be me, right? That's the goal, is that they can say, that can be me. I can be Michael Levis. I can be Tony Bonilla. I can be James Lamont. I can be whoever I want. And the building is going to hopefully showcase that any new student, whoever they want to be. And that's our goal, is to make sure it's diverse and inclusive. So that's sort of all I want to talk to you as an overview. I hope I haven't taken too much time. It's an exciting time at the law school, the new building, and so many great things happening. Now I want to turn it over to Justice Veronica Rivas Malloy, who is a Chief Justice, to talk about, and she's co-chair of the Hispanic Law Alumni Network, to do some greetings. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dean Baines. I appreciate it. And I'm very much looking forward to this new law school and to the celebration of so many diverse alumni. I cannot agree with you more that it's so important to be able to see ourselves and to reflect ourselves in the future as students. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. On behalf of the Hispanic Law Alumni Group, we're so happy to have you. And we're so excited to have Chief Justice Doreen Contreras and Justice Janus as our keynote speakers today. I know that you will find their stories and their journeys incredibly inspiring. And of course, I'm especially excited to be part of the UH Law Center's first Hispanic Heritage Month event, a tradition that we hope will continue to grow and expand each year. Our diverse alumni have contributed so much to our legal community. And as Dean Baines says, it's so important to take a moment like this to truly highlight our talent and to celebrate our heritage and our culture. Last year, in the middle of the pandemic, a group of alumni we formed a steering committee. And with Dean Baines' support and the assistance of former Senior Director of Development, Magda Herrera, we started the Hispanic Law Alumni Group, or as we call it, the HLA. Eric Munoz and I were elected as the inaugural HLA co-chairs. We are so fortunate to be serving with a group of highly successful and diverse alumni who serve on the HLA steering committee. We are extremely thankful to Dean Baines, the law school, and Hope Young, the executive director for Law Alumni Relations, for their support, but more importantly, for giving us the platform to promote engagement between our Hispanic alumni and the Law Center students, for the purpose truly to promote excellence and diversity of faculty, students, and staff. We really look forward to expanding our HLA membership and having future in-person events. That Law School Terrace look perfect for next year, I'm hoping. And the whole purpose here is really to build our community and help ensure the future success of our diverse students. That I know we're all rooting for them, and I know we're here for them. And so I'm so glad to see that there's some students on this call because we're here for them, truly. I hope you enjoy our program today. I can tell you that you're in for a real treat because you're gonna hear from two amazing trailblazing justices who truly have paved the way for women and Hispanic attorneys in the judiciary. I'm inspired by them every time I hear them speak. And I just want to turn it over to Dean Baines for their introduction.
On mute. What I also realized I didn't do, am I unmuted? Yes, I'm unmuted. Okay, what I didn't do is I didn't introduce the, for 1 second, why is, mute myself. That. What I didn't do is I didn't talk about the Mariachi Band. So let me digress for a second, and let me do that. I apologize for being a little bit scattered today. For 1 second. So the Mariachi Band is a Mariachi Nuevo Santander. Is recognized as A-rated, Roma High School. It's recognized as A-rated school district in the city of Roma, Texas, in deep South Texas. Tradition and excellence is what has defined Mariachi Nuevo Santander in the past 27 years. Since 1994, the mariachi has given the community a sense of pride and recognition at the state and national level. They've generated many accomplishments, recorded 3 albums, appeared on national TV, and have performed throughout the US. Throughout the generations, Mariachi Nuevo Santander has proudly represented Roma ISD and its community in many different locations, and has won many national and regional titles. They've appeared on NBC's nationally televised program, The America's Got Talent, season 12. They've also appeared on Kelly Clarkson's nationally televised show. And I hope that we'll be able to see more of them later this evening. But now let me transition to introducing first Chief Justice Doreen Contreras. So Chief Justice Doreen Contreras was first elected to the court in 2002. She began her first term in 2003, was reelected in 2008 and 2014. She was elected Chief Justice in 2018 and will serve in this position through 2024. She was raised in Pharr, Texas, the youngest of 4 children. Her parents were first-generation Mexican Americans. Both sets of grandparents immigrated from Mexico in the early 1900s and settled in the Rio Grande Valley. She attended UT Austin, where she received a Bachelor of Business Administration and Accounting. She was the first in her family to go to college. And in response to a job offer, she moved to Houston, Texas, and worked as an accountant for several years before applying to law school. She began law school in the night program at the University of Houston and continued working full-time. In May 1990, she received her law degree, Doctor of Jurisprudence, and she was very active in many law school organizations and won the Distinguished Service Award at graduation. She submitted to practice in Texas. She began her legal career as associate at the Thomas and Turlow and Associates. Then she moved to San Antonio and worked for law offices Frank Herrera. Then she transferred to the McAllen branch and became managing partner. And she also had mediation practice. She was considered for by the congressional delegation, a nomination for the United States District Court seat in Corpus Christi. She served in many community organizations and boards, such as the Trial Lawyers Association. She was president of the Hidalgo County Bar Association, and she's won multiple awards, such as the 2021 Hispanic Women Making History Award, the Hispanic Women Network Rio Grande Valley chapter. She won the 2019 Woman of Distinction, Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce, among many other awards. So first we'll have Chief Justice Contreras give a little background on herself, and then we'll introduce Justice Yanus, and that'll be Q&A by me. So thank you. So Chief Justice Contreras.
Thank you, Dean Baines. Appreciate that. And thank you very much to Justice Rivas Malloy, Eric Munoz, and all others who organized this celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. I certainly appreciate being asked to participate. So as you just heard, I did grow up in the Rio Grande Valley as the youngest of 4. Neither my parents or my older siblings went to college. So with no professional role models in the family, when I went to UT, I really wasn't sure what field to pursue. My friends were majoring in accounting and they suggested accounting, so sounded good. That's what I did, not having any idea of what accountants did, to be honest. But after college, I moved to Houston and began to work as an accountant. Law school was not on my radar for a couple of reasons at that time. First, I had become a single mother when I was in college. My daughter was 18 months old when I graduated. So getting a job and supporting her was my only priority. And quite frankly, I wouldn't have even considered law school because I truthfully thought you had to be a genius to go to law school. I remember when I was at UT and I'd ride the shuttle bus on and off campus, and it would stop by the law school, and we'd pick up the law students and they'd get on back in those years, of course, with their big old giant books. And I would just look at them in awe and think you just had to be a genius. So I'm not a genius, and I certainly didn't think it was something I could do. But years later, as you heard, I worked as an accountant for years in Houston. And after finding myself in what I describe a rut, which was basically unfulfilled in my job, I decided I needed to make a change. And at that time, a childhood friend of mine was attending law school. And he was someone, of course, I knew and could relate to. And I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So I applied to law school. And because I knew that I wanted to do something dealing more with helping people. And so law school seemed to be the right move. And so I applied. And I was 29 years old when I started law school in June of 1987. By then I was married and had my second daughter, who was 15 months old. And my family really couldn't afford for me to quit my job. So I did go to the night program. And then about halfway through that difficult schedule, I borrowed enough money to keep us afloat, and I finished law school in May of 90. And I want to say that I appreciate that U of H has and offers a night program, because not all law schools do. And it's a great opportunity, a great program. I recall feeling very intimidated as I was on my way to orientation, thinking I would be the oldest person there. And much to my surprise, there were folks in their 30s, their 40s, even 50s seeking second and third careers. So I met many interesting people of different backgrounds, and many of my counterparts from the night program are very successful lawyers today. So I'm glad to see you still offer that program. So I was working as a trial attorney when I was inspired to run for office by a college friend whose name is Leticia Hinojosa, who is now a judge on our court. She was the first female trial court judge in the Rio Grande Valley in the late 80s. And about mid-90s, she decided to vacate her county court at law seat to run for a district court. And she encouraged me to seek that position, as she preferred to see a woman succeed her. She was still the only woman trial judge in Hidalgo County at that time. So I ran in 1996, and so did 4 other men. I got into a runoff and lost. And while it was very disappointing, it was a valuable, eye-opening experience, because I had never been involved in any sort of campaigning before. Then years later, I ran for the Court of Appeals. This was 2002, this time at the suggestion of a male colleague. But before deciding to run, however, I sought the advice of Justice Yanus, who you will hear from shortly. She was serving on the court at the time. And so I called her and asked to meet with her, and she kindly did. And I said, tell me what your job is on a day-to-day basis. I was a trial attorney and familiar with the job of a trial judge, but I had handled very few appeals. And once she described the job, I realized I was well suited for the appellate judiciary, so I went for it. Now, this is where my previous run came in handy, because it's a 20-county district. So I had to establish myself outside of my home county. Having some name ID in Hidalgo County from that run gave me the luxury of spending more time in the 19 other counties where I was not known. Now, I had a very tough primary opponent who worked as hard as I did and had very impressive credentials. And plus, he was a very nice guy. He still is a nice guy. And so I remember when I commented to a friend that he had gone to Yale and Harvard. And my friend's response was, so what? He couldn't get into any Texas schools? So that helped me relax about that. I won the primary. I also had a general that I won, and I began serving in 2003. And as you heard, the dean said, I was challenged in the general elections in 2008 and 2014. and won. And then in 2016, I got a wild hair and I ran statewide for the Texas Supreme Court. Now, spoiler alert here, I'm a Democrat, and in Texas, we haven't elected a Democrat statewide since the mid-1990s, so the odds were completely against me. But I decided there was a more important reason to run, and that was to voice the message that the Texas Supreme Court was lacking in diversity from an ideological, gender, and ethnic standpoint, just like Justice Yanus espoused when she ran for the Supreme Court in 2008. The message resonated as I was endorsed by the major newspapers in Dallas and Houston and Corpus, even though I was running against an incumbent. And I only lost by 1.2 million. So you can chalk that one up. But it was, regardless, a great experience. In 2018, I ran for Chief Justice of the Court after our chief retired. So I am now in my third year, and it's been a heck of a ride with COVID and a ransomware attack, but that's a story for another day. Oh, and by the way, the loss that I suffered back in 1996 was vindicated with winning a seat on the Court of Appeals because I now grade the papers of the judge that beat me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Justice. Now introduce Justice Yanus. So Justice Linda Janus is a trailblazer, as everyone here is tonight. She was appointed by Governor Ann Richards to Texas 13th Court of Appeals, making her the first Latina state appellate judge in the history of Texas, and the first woman to serve as justice at the 13th Court of Appeals. During tenure on the bench, Justice Janus authored hundreds of opinions on many topics facing Texas. Additionally, for more than a quarter of a century, she's worked tirelessly toward the improvement of law by teaching lawyers and judges at varying CLE courses throughout Texas and the nation, ranging on a lot of different issues. In 2003, Justice Janus was elected to the prestigious American Law Institute, which is an organization, a very prestigious organization of judges, lawyers, and law professors in the country. She's worked on international jurisdiction and judgments, the Model Penal Code, and the Model Penal Code, and sentencing guidelines. She's also served as a faculty member at the National Judicial College, and she continues to teach in the trial advocacy program at Harvard Law School. Prior to her serving as judge, Justice Janus served as clinical instructor at Harvard Law School, as head of the Immigration Clinic, and as regional counsel for the Mexican-American Law, Legal Defense and Educational Fund in Chicago. Served on the transition team for Clinton Gore in 1992, dealing with immigration issues. And she's very, very, very well accomplished in so many areas and has been recognized. She's not a UH Law alum, but she is fabulous nonetheless. She has her bachelor's degree from Pan American University, now Texas RGV, her Juris Doctorate from Thurgood Marshall, our neighbor in the Third Ward, and her Master of Law degree from the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia. So welcome, Justice Janus. Thank you.
Thank you. The setting is, excuse me, 1976, frigid Chicago. An 8.5 months pregnant Latina is preparing for the bar exam, taking the bar review course while working full-time for the Legal Assistance Foundation of Chicago. Some of the male bar applicants were so uncomfortable with a pregnant woman in their midst that they went to the bar examiners and complained that she could go into labor and disrupt the test to their detriment. So the pregnant woman took the test in a different room from the rest of the group. She passed the test, becoming one of the first Latinas to be licensed in Illinois. The baby girl she gave birth to was told when she took the bar, "You'll do great. You've already sat through a bar exam." Dicho y hecho, that baby is now a justice on the First Court of Appeals in Houston, Justice Amparo Yanus Guerra, and the pregnant woman, of course, is me. This is the environment into which I burst onto the legal arena. At that time, less than 15% of law students were women, 5% Black women, and less than 1% Latinas. I have been a lawyer for 45 years. My story is too long, too intense, too inconceivable to cover in 5 minutes. What can I extract that can be of value to you? We are not born who we are. I spent summers of my adolescence working in cotton fields in South Texas and vegetable fields in Northern Illinois. Working conditions in those fields, no toilets, no shade, laboring dawn till dusk. My parents did not go to high school. For me to do so would have been highly significant accomplishment in and of itself. School. I attended a segregated school system, segregated by language. English speakers started first grade at 6 years old. Non-English speakers started a level called beginners at 6, high first at 7, and first grade at 8. A system geared to have the brown kids drop out before completing high school because they were too old and needed to go to work. My mom wanted me ahead of the game, so at 5, I started first grade. Counselors did not counsel brown kids toward college. They knew they were not even going to finish high school. I began my senior year ranked #1 in my class. There was no focus on my academic future. You beat the odds on your own. My childhood experiences were indelibly imprinted in my psyche, and these are just a few examples. Fast forward, after a quick stint in DC after college, I returned to Texas and taught elementary school, returning to engage my students in the same narrative of my childhood. But they had the added burden of immigrant status, which I had not suffered, and that's a whole other story. As a teacher, I was beyond distressed and disturbed by a Texas law prohibiting children who were not, quote, lawfully admitted to the United States from attending public schools. I went to the school board, raising the issue of the injustice to my students and their families of this law, and was totally ignored. Fast forward to law school. I had a purpose when I went to law school. There were so many wrongs to be righted just from my personal life experiences. I wanted that law license so I could have a weapon in those fights. God opened some doors for me and I ran through them with some trepidation, but not a lot of fear. I started early as a summer intern with the Legal Assistance Foundation of Chicago Farm Worker Project and worked on cases challenging working conditions and wage and hour issues. I revisited those farms where I had toiled. When I met with those farm workers as a law student, I knew them because I was them. Then came the law degree and a couple of law licenses in Illinois and Texas. I was ready. At that point, being female and Latina were not barriers. They were my fuel, my metal, which gave me the audacity to believe I could change the course of the narrative even a little bit. I left Chicago and returned to my roots in South Texas to work with Texas Rural Legal Aid on immigration issues. One morning, Mrs. Reina walks into my office. She had just been served with a TRO enjoining her from having her children admitted to the Brownsville School District. That encounter positioned me smack in the middle of the multi-district litigation of Doe versus Plyler, challenging Texas on that statute, allowing school district employees to determine who had been lawfully admitted to the US for purposes of attending school. If I had more time, I could tell you that war story. But fast forward to 1982. I get a call from the local ABC reporter. She calls me and she says, "Hey, Linda, you want to gloat on TV?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "Well, first let me tell you, there were no cell phones, there were no computers, there was nothing. We had landlines and typewriters." And so she tells me, "We just got news that the United States Supreme Court ruled in your favor in the school case." I was stunned. I grabbed the receiver and threw it up in the air. You can only imagine the euphoria of that moment on that lawyer, former school teacher, taking the breath of the air of justice, the most improbable of dreams. Fast forward, I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, teaching the immigration clinic at Harvard Law School, and I get a call from Professor Edelman from Georgetown Law, and he tells me that he's the head of the transition team for the Clinton-Gore transition presidential team. And he says, "I understand you know a little immigration." I said, "Yeah, I do." He says, "Well, we'd like to know if you'd be willing to come to Washington and head up the immigration team for the president-elect Clinton." And I said, "What is that? And what am I talking about?" To make a long story short, within about a week, I was in DC and was able to pick the team, and we prepared the briefing book for our president-elect on immigration issues. Fast forward, I am working in Brownsville on a project to help Haitians who had been held in South Texas specifically so that they wouldn't have anybody who spoke Creole and could help them in any of their immigration cases. And I had represented a lot of Haitians in Boston. And I get a call from a friend of mine who was a justice on the 13th Court of Appeals. And he says to me, Linda, Governor Ann Richards is looking to make an appointment to the 13th Court of Appeals. We have an opening, and she would like to appoint the first woman to the court, and especially that there had never been a Latina appellate judge ever in the history of Texas. So she would like to make that historic appointment. Are you interested? And I was dumbfounded. I had no idea that position existed. I had not applied. I knew nothing about it. To make another long story short, within a couple of weeks, I was in Austin, having filled out a bunch of papers and got the appointment to sit as the first woman on the 13th Court of Appeals. And again, Latina ever appellate judge in Texas. Again, the most improbable of dreams. History being made by that little Mexican girl who had the audacity to believe that justice is a verb, and we are the authors of our own narrative. We are not born who we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Yanus. Thank you, Chief Justice Contreras. It was an absolutely moving conversation. And we have some questions. And certainly anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question, you might want to put in the chat, but we have some questions in advance I'd like to ask the panelists, the two speakers. So we heard your stories and they're so moving. And one thing that's so striking to me is how, and it's, I think of my own journey, how unexpected the journey is. And so I'm going to vary from the questions a little bit because I just want to relate to it. But how do you advise lawyers and students to cope with this unexpectedness? How do you advise them to take advantage? I mean, as you point out, I would never imagine being dean of a leading law school in Houston, and neither of you would imagine being justice of on the Court of Appeals. What would you suggest to people about seizing opportunities and those sorts of things?
Can I start there?
Sure.
Let me tell you why. Because what I want to tell any lawyers or any of the law students that are in the audience is that good lawyers make good judges. And so what I advise is whatever is in front of you, whatever your job is in front of you, be the best. Be ethical. Because when I say good lawyers make good judges, a lawyer can be involved in whatever area of the law. It doesn't matter what you practice, it's how you practice it. Were you ethical? Were you always on time? One who knew more about the case than anyone else? How dedicated were you to the work in front of you? And people will notice that. I never applied for anything. People came to me and said, we would like to see you here in this position here. And I really, really, truly was dumbfounded. I was like, why me? And it was that for 17 years before I got on the bench, I was out there hard every day for that client, giving everything I had to do the job in front of me. And so that is the advice that I would give.
Thank you.
And I would follow up with that and say, when opportunities present themselves, don't second guess yourself. I have to say, especially we as women, we tend to say, oh, I'm not ready. Oh, I'm not qualified. Oh, I need, more experience. And we hold ourselves back. And we've just got to, take risks sometimes and just go for it. but it is important that you be informed about what you're going for to make sure it's something you're going to enjoy. As you well know, you've got to have a passion for what you're doing. And as Justice Yanus said, you show that passion by being the best at whatever area of practice of law you're in. But when other opportunities come up, whether it be a judgeship or something else, you look into it. And if it's something that you think you will enjoy, then just go for it, because there's a reason those opportunities have been presented to you.
Great, thank you. So this is related to one in the chat, but also one of the questions on my list is, what is one of the most challenging obstacles you faced in your career, and how did you overcome it? And I'll add on to what one of the chat questions is about microaggressions of this. One of our guests or members of the audience says she's a Latina attorney, and how do you deal with dealing microaggressions from older white male attorneys and judges? So they're kind of related in that, obstacles generally, but also obstacles specifically in terms of race and gender and ethnicity.
Well, I had looked at that question, and my answer is actually very practical and pragmatic, because when I thought of obstacles with respect to being a judge, is that in Texas, we elect our judges in partisan races. So you have to run, and it's a political race. And I found one of the most difficult things, and I think this may still be true, is that if you're running in a political race, you have to raise money. And women have a harder time than men. And so I found that very, very challenging, is getting out there. I remember making those phone calls, and a dear friend of mine, Justice Alice Oliver Parrott, I'm calling her, and she says, "No, you'd rather be chewing glass than making this phone call." And that is the truth. So for me, I really would like to hear from Justice Contreras, but for me, I thought that was one of the toughest parts of running for office.
I have to agree. It certainly is. But as far as over my career, as one of the challenging obstacles that I faced, I'll be very candid, was this last race. As you heard, I've had multiple campaigns, but this one for Chief Justice was the most challenging, because I had served on the court for 16 years. It was understood by my colleagues and by the outgoing chief that I would succeed him because I was the most experienced member of the court. However, a male attorney from my home county decided he wanted to be chief. And he's a very smart, very accomplished, very successful lawyer with a lot of personal wealth. And it was surprising that he decided to run for the position, because he was a friend from my professional circle there in Hidalgo County. And what was disappointing was that at first he tried to discourage me. He actually met with me and gave me a litany of reasons of why I should not run. And then when I didn't back down, he made good on his threats, and he poured a significant amount of money into the campaign. And in the end, I think he outspent me 4-1. And ran a very grandiose campaign. And then, rather than simply running on qualifications, he attacked me personally. Campaigning in a 20-county district is physically challenging, but this one was especially mentally challenging. And to boot, the Good Old Boy Network put it in gear when they were concerned about a woman becoming Chief Justice of the court. So I had to contend with that as well. But fortunately, that network is outnumbered by a lot of wonderful men and women that supported me. So I won by close to 64% of the vote. But honestly, going into the election the night before, I really felt that I was not going to win. So it was demoralizing. But I just got up each day and kept going, and fortunately, it worked out.
Great. Well, that's important to know for those who may be interested in public service, which is this question is, how do we get more lawyers to have the passion, commitment for public service, like the two judges? So that's a good point. Next question: how has your Hispanic heritage positively impacted your legal career?
Well, in my case, what can I say? I was literally appointed to, break that barrier that we had never had a Latina appellate judge ever in Texas, where we are such a large minority. And so obviously that was a factor in my in my appointment. And again, as I mentioned in my comments, the experiences that I had before I became a lawyer, before I went to law school, were the very reasons and what motivated me to go to law school, to get that law degree, to have that in box, to be able to address the issues that I lived. So being who I am and a Latina is everything, about who I am and the path that I decided to take to, again, to change the narrative that I had seen when I was a child.
Thank you. Chief Justice Contreras.
Well, I have to say, truth be told, it probably helped me get into law school to begin with. I was not one of those students that was admitted automatically based on a combined GPA and LSAT score. My scores were good, but they certainly weren't at the top. And fortunately, at the time, U of H was admitting a percentage of its class on other factors. And so I believe my Hispanic heritage was one of those factors. But of course, once in the door, I had to compete. But apart from that, I come from very humble, first generation American, hardworking parents that did not achieve higher education. And I think my upbringing helped me appreciate the opportunity that I had as a lawyer to make a difference in people's lives. And that's what drove me to law school. And, working full time while taking night classes as a wife and mother was tough. But as I heard a certain actress say recently, people think of Latina women as being fiery and fierce, which is usually true. But I think the quality that so many Latinas possess is strength. That was Zoe Saldana, she's an actress. So it's that strength and determination that I learned from my upbringing that has helped me succeed every day.
Great, thank you. What about diversity? Why is diversity important for the judiciary?
Absolutely is. That was the theme when I ran for the Supreme Court. And that is that when you are at the deliberative table, especially at the appellate level, because at the appellate level, it's not like being a trial judge where you make the decision by yourself. This is a collaborative effort. And I've always said the most influential judge on a multi-member court is the one who could get the votes, right? Because you get the votes on the cases that you're working on in order to write the majority opinion. And the reality is that who we are, our backgrounds, personal, legal, come to the table. There are arguments at the table when you're discussing some of the most important cases. Many of the cases are pretty straightforward, but the hard cases are the hard ones. And I mean, I could tell you stories about those discussions and trying to win over the votes and, to the cases that you're working on. And so that is when I wrote my LLM thesis on a case involved on an immigration case. And I talked about that the decision in that case would have been different if there had been somebody like me at the table, and that I could have brought that perspective to the table and maybe persuaded the judges the other way. One of the problems with our Texas Supreme Court is that we have people who come not only from the same political party, but the same views and very similar backgrounds. And in order for the people in the state or the people in this country to have confidence in the result, you have to have confidence in the process. And that process should be the most important issues in our country are by appellate courts. And you need to have a diversity of views so that you can feel, again, it gives legitimacy to the decisions that are being made, not if everything's coming just from one point of view and everybody's agreeing. I mean, that's in a nutshell why it's important.
I can attest to the discussions that Justice Janus was referring to, because we served together for 8 years. So I had many discussions and debates with her. But as she said, I agree with everything she said. Can't say it any better. Just it's, the diverse judiciary is representative of the demographics of the community. And because the decisions that we make impact lives, they're not just cases, they impact lives of people. So it's important that there's these different experiences and different perspectives in order to understand the issues and relate to them.
Thank you. It was great. So as you reflect on your career, what accomplishments are you most proud of? And what legacy do you hope to leave for those who come after?
For myself, in my legal career, I worked on so many cases with some wonderful teams of lawyers that we were able to win, have literally changed the lives of millions of people. There are people, I'm sure, in this audience right now who would never have gone to school if it wasn't for the Plyler decision. There are people who, in fact, I want to say that the young family that I represented in that case, I got a Facebook message a few years ago because the little boy who was being not admitted to school, Jose Reina, is now a registered nurse in Houston. And he was the kid they were trying to keep out of school. And as I looked more into their family, it turned out that his dad was a US citizen. And so he wasn't even an immigrant to begin with, but he was labeled that under the system that we had. And so, there we are, real life. And here we are in the world that we're in right now with COVID. And he's not the only one, right? Who are nurses that are working at, and who otherwise would never have had that opportunity when they deserved it. So, and I mean, again, we don't have enough time to go into the different cases, and I can think of some cases on the Court of Appeals where I felt that, my decision made a difference. And there's a criminal case that I could talk about when that decision was made by the Court of Criminal Appeals. They, 9 former prosecutors, Republicans, and reversed a conviction that I had written a dissent on because I couldn't convince my 13th Court of Appeals judges to go along with me. And then my dissent resulted in a reversal by the Court of Criminal Appeals. And I told my law clerk that day, that's why I went to law school, for a case like this. So, I mean, I've had an amazing career, and I don't know what to say other than that I feel like, I was meant to be a lawyer.
Well, I serving as a positive role model, especially to young Latinas in our community, is important to me. That is one of the reasons I felt it was important that I run for the Chief Justice position, to be the first woman to serve as our chief, and as you mentioned, only the second Latina statewide, so that they can have examples of Latinas in leadership positions. So when I speak to young students, I share with them that I'm no different from them as they're growing up, and I encourage them to, of course, pursue their educational goals, but more importantly, to not let life's obstacles stop them, because we all have to confront challenges as we go through life. And I stress the importance of a strong work ethic and just sticking with it. So in my case, as becoming a single mother in college could have derailed me. It could have stopped me, but I found a way to continue by taking advantage of resources that were available to me, including financial aid, affordable student housing, even food stamps. I knew I was going to put myself in a position to pay the government back. And attending law school at night while working full time with a husband and 2 children at home was tough, but I kept telling myself, this is temporary. It's a temporary sacrifice that will benefit them in the long run. And I can attest that my children are doing well and were not scarred by lack of attention during my law school years. They're successful. So I hope that my legacy will be simply that of a strong, hardworking, honest judge that influenced people in a positive way.
Great, thank you. So we may have alluded to this, you may have, but we talked a little bit about why you ran for justice. I think you both sort of answered that otherwise. Why did you run for justice for the court? I mean, I think you did sort of answer that in other contexts, unless you want to add something to that. But otherwise, we can move on to the other last question here. What work experience did you have prior to going to law school, and how they impact your legal career? I think you've sort of answered that a little bit too, actually, as I think about it. But if you want to add anything to that, you can.
Oh, I could just add that, being an accountant actually came in very helpful as a lawyer, because when I handled cases that I had to have a good understanding of financial issues, it certainly helped then. And now, as Chief Justice of the court, I'm responsible for the court's finances and the budget. So having that background has been very helpful. And I worked at banks in high school and college. And my first job was at Dairy Queen. Now, that didn't really help my legal career, but I made great cones.
Any other words, Justice Yanus?
Well, my whole adult life career has been in the law, because I went to law school in my early 20s. I was a school teacher for just a couple of years, and I knew that I had not thought about going to law school, but I got involved in a political race, and one of the people involved there, they were all lawyers, most of them that were involved with the Democratic Party at the time. And they're the ones who encouraged me and said, you need to go to law school, when I talked about the things that I wanted to do. And so really, I've been a lawyer my adult life.
Great, thank you. So there was one question we sort of not overlooked, but it was from Brianna Argueta, and she wanted to know about microaggressions from older white male attorneys. How do you deal with those? Was her question.
I'm the old lady here, and when I walked in a room, I was the only female. Forget about I was the only Latino for sure, but I would walk into a room of all males, Latino males, white males, whatever. I mean, that was my world. There were no women out there who were lawyers. And I have to say, maybe because I was so focused on what I wanted to do, they didn't bother me. They just didn't. That was if they did it, it bounced off of me because I was so focused. I mean, I've been a lawyer for 45 years. So I became a lawyer in the 70s. And it really, really was a completely different world. And I knew what I wanted to do and that I was going to do it. And again, I can't really relate to that question.
And I think there is less and less of that. There's less of it even when I came along as a lawyer in the 90s. But to the extent that it does exist, you just have to let it, ride off you. You just cannot let it bother you because you just don't want to stoop to that level. But I do want to say that, I belong to various organizations at a national level with chief justices and other judges. And I do find, for instance, I just attended a conference in California recently, and one of my colleagues, the Chief Justice from San Antonio, and I, we were the only Latinas in a group of maybe 100. And I'm on the executive committee for the Council of Chief Judges for the State Courts of Appeals. I'm the only Latina. So what's very important that I want to encourage as judges, as lawyers, as law students, is getting involved in and getting into these organizations and putting yourself in there so that we all have a seat at the table, because that's the only way that type of behavior is going to stop. You know, we deserve the respect that everyone else gets, and you earn it, but you just can't let that little stuff get to you.
There's a related question from the audience, from Dan Martinez. It says, the challenges for women and Hispanics and other minorities are on the rise here in Texas. How does one maintain a positive attitude in the current political environment here in the state and at the national level? Any thoughts?
It's tough. The political environment is tough, that's for sure. Especially as a Democrat in Texas. But, you know, we've just got to, like I said, we've just got to continue to do the right thing, you know, keep up the good fight, believe in yourself, be confident, be involved, have a voice. We have to have a voice. And we just can't, you know, let ourselves be affected by the negativity. I mean, there's always going to be negativity at various levels, and we just can't let it get to us.
And you have to express that voice.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the point, is myself and Doreen, and I saw Judge Briones, and we're here because we didn't stay silent. We didn't. And it's a risk, right? You're taking a risk every time when you put yourself out there, and you have to do it. And believe me, I look back on my life and I ask myself, what was I thinking? You know, I could, you know, tell you war story after war story of just throwing myself out there, and that's what it takes.
And one thing we can do is support each other. And we can do that through the networking organizations that we belong to. I was going to stress that one of the important things for anybody that's considering running for judge is the importance of networking, because that's, you know, your base. And you network, of course, through your community organizations, your professional organizations, your church. These are the people that know you. And you know, people need to be able to connect with you. And by being involved in these organizations, we support each other, we empower one another. And I have to give an example, because I'm very proud that several are some U of H alum, in fact, Judge Briones being one of them. We just formed the Texas Latinx Judges, which is the first organization of its type in Texas. And our purpose is exactly that, not to only to educate and empower Latino judges, but also to establish a talent pipeline for future. So it's open to everybody, including students. So just go to www.texaslatinxjudges.org and check us out and join us. And let's all help each other.
Well, thank you so much, both Justice Yanus and Chief Justice Contreras. And Justice Yanus, we would like to make you an honorary member of our law alumni.
Yay!
Well, I'm a mom.
That's
I'm a
right.
mom of one of your alums.
Oh, great. I don't know if you can see that.
That
Wait,
counts.
can you see that? Soto.
Oh, I love it. Oh my goodness.
So we'll send it to you.
Well, thank you so much. That truly is an honor.
You're welcome. We'll send it to you. So now we're going to have go into breakout rooms, and you have a chance to have more intimate conversations with some of the judges and some of the other folks who are on the members of the audience. And that'll take place for about 10 minutes. So thank you again to both Justice Contreras and Justice Yanus. Sandra's gonna, Associate Tennessee's gonna work her magic with the break.
I
She's gonna
will. I need
beam
to.
us aboard. Beam us aboard, Scotty.
So please, when you go to the breakout rooms, if you would turn your cameras on, that would be great. And I need to just do a little extra mixing here. If you all would oblige me. Okay. All right, so we'll spend about 10 minutes in our breakout rooms. All right, and I'll be here at home base. If something happens, I will help you. All right.
Where do we get margaritas?
Okay, I'm pressing the button.
That's for the second annual. That's for the second annual.
Okay.
Okay, if anybody's having trouble getting in the room, just let me know. They may have stepped away or something. Okay, I'm gonna run down the hall right quick, Hope. Got it. I'm back.
It's still just me.
Okay, this is good. So I have the PowerPoint queued and the last video queued, and then I think we're good to go.
Thanks for all your technical help. That was great.
Yeah, no, it went. I was so concerned because I turned my crazy computer off and turned it back on. And really, before I turned it off, it seemed like it was working fine.
Mhm.
When I turned it back on, oh my gosh, it was just dragging. I'm like,
Oh no.
is the stuff gonna come back? What's happening here?
That's just crazy. Well, I think, and our timing has been good.
Yeah. So these groups are a good size. It looks like the biggest one is 6 people.
Oh, that's nice and intimate though. So, because we probably had 36 to 38 people that were still on the call to go into breakout rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while we were at like 48, but Brina was
Mhm.
on twice and Gina Benavides was on twice.
Oh,
So I
okay.
think we probably ended up with like 46 realistically.
It was a great crowd.
Oh, I was thrilled. And I love seeing all the different people from all sorts of different organizations. And somebody chatted me on the chat and said it's somebody I had literally not seen in probably, let me think how old I am, probably 20 years. And he's actually not one of our alums. And he and I served as co-chairs on a board together 20 years ago. And he's now head of the Hispanic bar.
Okay, I'm just telling they have about
Yeah,
3.
that's good. That's perfect. I think the messaging is good. Anyway, is that not a hoot?
Yes,
20 years later.
that is too funny. I think I'm gonna have to go for a walk when I get home.
I'm so cold. I can't, I mean, I'm gonna have to move in some way just to warm up.
You're gonna have to get you a heater.
Yes, but I can just go home and put my really heavy laptop on my lap. And warm up.
That is so sad.
I need a heater, reading glasses, a USB port.
Yeah, this little cup, it puts out just enough, you know, that it's not too hot, but it's like toasty.
Yes, that's perfect. Okay, so you'll think this is funny. So I told my girls at home that when I got home tonight, I wanted them to see the mariachis that played, the students, just because I thought it was so neat and I thought that song was so well done. So my youngest, who really is just really funny, she just is witty and funny. She sent me a recording of her singing La Cucaracha and said, I hope you have a great program, and then sang the song in a video. I was like, this is so random, but so on point. I think Amparo, who is in the chat and was our last, I think that is just as Janus's daughter.
I have her on the list. I feel like I've communicated. I need to look at my spreadsheet.
Okay, well, I think she's the daughter, and that's who. And so anyway, I think she was helping behind the scenes, and I know Justice Rivas Malloy was in touch with her as well. I never heard her last name, but now that I see the name, that's who it must be.
Okay. So I'm going to close the rooms here.
Oh, those look great. People stayed.
And how much time? Hi, how much time
Hi.
we have to wait until they are back?
Oh,
They'll
they-
be back in 30 seconds.
Hi,
Yeah.
Miss Monica. How many?
30.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Sofia. ¿Cómo estás?
Everything's been fabulous.
Hey, so
So
glad
happy
you
to
could
see
join
you.
us.
Oh, in the mariachi, everything has been terrific. Bravo.
Hi, Sophia. How you doing?
I'm good. How are
Thank
you,
you,
Judge?
Doing
Hello,
good, doing
Professor
good.
Guerra.
Hi,
Yeah,
Josie.
well, and hi, Professor
see you.
Guerra.
Hey, Judge Rendon, how are you?
That's good. And Justice Contreras and Justice.
Hi, Judge Rendon. Good to
Hi,
see you.
and Justice Veronica. And isn't that wonderful to see each other?
Well,
And,
I was muted. Good to see you.
hi, how you
Good.
doing?
How are you? Great to see you. How's Ruben?
Oh, he's doing good.
Good.
So everything okay with you, huh? That's great.
Yeah.
And by the way, she swore me in. Judge
Oh.
Yanus swore me in when I became a district judge. She came all the way from the valley to swear me in here in Houston.
I
so.
did. It was wonderful. We have such a long
great.
history.
Judge Rendon, you and I share that because she was wonderful and swearing me in as well. And I feel so
Isn't that
fortunate.
nice?
It's like we're all her
That's right.
babies, you know, her
And you know
sworn
what else we
babies.
share? You know what else we share, right? I'm a minor also besides
I
that.
know, go you too.
We went to the same undergraduate, El Paso,
Yes.
University of El Paso, of Texas in El Paso, and then we went to U of H Law. So
You're gonna be hearing from me soon because we're starting up a UTEP Law alumni as well.
oh,
great.
that's great. That's great. Well, I ended up not graduating from UT El Paso though, but I was there the
Once
year
a
it
minor,
became.
always a minor.
That's right. That's right. It was the very first year that it was a UT El Paso, by the way. So it was the year after it was Texas Western.
Yes.
So that'll tell you my
And
age.
I was telling, Justice Hightower's on the call. So the three of us share the distinction of having the only basketball team in Texas was ever won a national championship.
I saw that
yes.
movie. I saw the movie. Oh my God. I can see it over and over again. That was so
Glory
inspiring.
Road, yes.
Yes, I loved it.
And I went to UT El Paso the very next year after they won. So
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I did wear my green and gold Baylor tie during the NCAA tournament. And I don't pull it out. I don't pull it out very often.
I
But I
know
love El
not. I know
Paso.
not to go to his office whenever.
No.
And I was
These kind of
trying.
playoffs. I don't even go try to talk to him. I'm not going to talk
Well,
to him.
and of course, all of you Cougars here, we almost faced, I kept saying Justice Hightower, I was like, I want your team to win, but realize we might have to be enemies very soon here.
We were enemy one night, just one night we were enemy.
Well, next year, Judge Hightower.
And there's Miss Tennessee also. Good seeing you.
Great to see you too. And so now we have Eric who's going to close us out. But even without margaritas, you guys are a fun group.
Yeah, just imagine us with margaritas.
Exactly.
Harris is calling us next year with margaritas, so put it on the calendars. Well, thank you, everybody, and we hope you had a chance to enjoy a good breakout session. And like we said, hopefully soon we'll be able to do these types of events live in person and get a chance to connect with people in real life. Such a great group of people, and hopefully soon we'll be able to do that. As Justice Rivas Malloy mentioned, we're very excited to be a part of the UH Law Center's first Hispanic Heritage Month event. And we look forward to not only making this a tradition, but growing and expanding this tradition. As part of this inaugural event, we'd like to take a few moments to celebrate some of the accomplishments of our UH Hispanic alumni. From Tony Bonilla, the first Latino graduate in 1960, to today, our Latino and Latina alumni have made significant contributions to the legal community. Today, we would like to specifically recognize our alumni that have served or served as members of the judiciary. Starting with Judge, well, yeah, and we'll scroll through these real quickly, from Judge Rosemary Moreno.
Well, that's me.
All the way, you know, first Latino judge in Houston, and you see on the screen, Judge Josefina Rendon, Judge Juan Vasquez Sr., the first Latino tax court judge, Gina Benavides from the Court of Appeals, you know, just the talent that we have here, Justice Contreras that we heard from, Judge Carlero Ramirez, who was an associate municipal judge, Justice Veronica Rivas Malloy, of course, our inaugural co-chair, and really did a lot of the heavy lifting in putting this together. Justice Guerra, who holds a special place in one of our panelists, and actually a lot of our panelists' hearts. So it's great to see her on the screen, and Michelle Slaughter on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. So, you know, the talent that we have out there is just tremendous, and not only within the judiciary, we've also had a number of notable alumni with distinguished political careers and that have enjoyed success as corporate and civic leaders. We've also been fortunate to have great Latino and Latino role models as faculty at UH, including Professor Michael Levis, Professor Diego Thompson, and Professor Stephen Zamora. We've also had tremendous contributions from Latinos and Latinas serving within the law center's administration, including Hope Young, who was instrumental in putting all this together. Yeah, given the incredible talent of our diverse,
They just showed your mom's picture
that we had up there is just growing every day. And I think if you're interested, I think there's going to be a fuller version of the presentation that's available that you can view just some of the great accomplishments that our alumni have had over the years. And you'll be able to view that and download that. So again, we're glad you were able to spend some time with us to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. And of course, we're extremely grateful for Chief Justice Contreras and Justice Yanus. I hope you were as inspired and as encouraged as I was by their journeys and stories. You know, I could only hope that one day I have a kid there that grows up to be such an important member of the community from some action that I took. And, you know, we can all do that through mentoring, sponsoring scholarships, fundraising, just being there for members of our community. So it's great to have such great examples for all of us. Of course, we also like to thank Dean Baines. It's always great to hear about all the work that you and your team have been just continually doing to improve the UH Law Center. And as you can see behind us, that's just going to be a tremendous testament to the work that you all have put in. Yeah, as we go forward, as we start to gel a little bit more on the Hispanic Law Alumni Association, please be on the lookout for information and on how you can get involved. And we'll be sending that around shortly in the coming days. But on behalf of Justice Rivas Malloy, myself, and the UH Hispanic Law Alumni Steering Committee, we want to thank you for attending tonight's event. As we close out with the UH Puma Mariachis, we're sure you'll enjoy it. I think it has some mariachi music and dancing. So we'll close out with that. And thank you again for everybody. Thank you, justices, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.